Have you ever seen a quote from an online atheist and literally died of cringe? I'm not telling you that today's video is going to literally kill you, but I am telling you that it might. Christopher Hitchens was a well-known outspoken atheist that regularly criticized religion. And he was so popular, in fact, that he was considered one of the 4 horsemen of New Atheism. In Ed Fazer's book, The Last Superstition, he described Richard Dawkins, a prominent New Atheist, as a man that couldn't tell the difference between metaphysics and Metamucil, which unfortunately doesn't seem too far from the truth.
No, but I seriously can't tell the difference.
The New Atheists are not exactly known for offering informed critiques of religion.
Why stuttering?
According to many scholars, including atheist philosophers like Michael Ruse, the New Atheists displayed a complete, severe lack of understanding of philosophy and an even poorer understanding of theology. It's for these and other reasons that personally I've steered clear of any work of the New Atheists that they've created. There's much better atheistic arguments to contend with, like those from Graham Oppy, Paul Draper, Michael Tooley, and so on. Like, there's a lot. And so, okay, so be that as it may, I'm nevertheless a member of the Apologetics community, and I still see my fair share of New Atheist quotes and memes. The other day, I was perusing Facebook, as I often do, and I came across a New Atheist meme shared unironically by John W. Loftus, MA, Master of Divinity, Master of Theology, plus PhD work. The meme was a quote from Christopher Hitchens. The quote is so bad, I honestly couldn't believe that it was a direct quote from him. And in fact, so when I shared it on my page, some of the commenters couldn't believe it either and then demanded a source from me. Like, they were very skeptical of this. Well, sorry to say, the quote is very real. Hitchens did actually say what I'm about to show you. The infamous quote is embedded in an article published in the July 1982 issue of Harper's Magazine. Since probably no one under the age of 65 reads magazines anymore, I'll just tell you, Harper's Magazine, it's a general interest magazine, began in 1850, contains a long-form narrative journalism. Anyways, the title of Hitchens' article is The Lord and the Intellectuals. In the article, Hitchens explains how in the past there was widespread contempt for religion, but in recent times even secular individuals have shown more respect for religious beliefs. And then he ends the piece attempting to explain why atheism is both morally and intellectually superior to religion. This is where our quote comes in. Remember, he's attempting to explain why atheism is intellectually superior to theism. Okay, keep that in mind. All right, so here's the quote. Since it is obviously inconceivable that all religions can be right, the most reasonable conclusion is that they are all wrong. Again, this is a real quote. I'm not making this up. The link to the article is in the description. But to make matters worse, this is the only line in the entire article dedicated to explaining why he believes that atheism is intellectually superior. We're going to see in a moment why this line is so terrible. But before we do that, I just want to point out that this video isn't meant to bash Hitchens the person. This video is criticizing the idea or the argument, if you want to call it that Hitchens expressed. But this argument, it's bad, and I think it deserves to be called out for what it is. Okay, so why is this argument so bad? First, let's get clear on what it's actually saying. So in essence, it's saying that all religions are likely wrong since they can't all be right. In response, I'll do 2 things. So first, I'm going to explain how bad this reasoning actually is. And then second, I'm going to steelman the argument and then point out that the stronger version still doesn't work. And by the way, steelmanning your opponent is actually a really good practice. We don't do it enough. Bad arguments can still usually teach us something if we're willing to see them in their best light. So I think we all need to be doing it more often. Okay, so to quickly respond to the original argument, just because all answers can't be right, that does not mean that any particular answer is going to be wrong. To see why, let's apply Hitchens' reasoning to a different example and then just kind of see what happens. All right, here we go. Since it is obviously inconceivable that all women are my wife, the most reasonable conclusion is that none of them are. This is super dumb, okay? Just because not every woman is my wife, that doesn't mean that I don't have a wife. Here's a more serious example, okay? Since it is obviously inconceivable that all naturalistic theories of the origin of life can be right, the most reasonable conclusion is that they are all wrong. But just because not every answer can be right, that doesn't mean every proposed answer is probably wrong. Answers ought to be evaluated on their own merit, not on the basis of being like part of a group of proposed answers. Like imagine sitting in math class and claiming that no answer to 2 + 2 is correct because they can't all be correct. But maybe there's a way to steelman this objection and find at least some truth to it, right? It's important to do this. So here's, according to ChatGPT, how we can steelman Hitchens' argument.
The existence of numerous and often contradictory religious beliefs and claims from various traditions and cultures raises significant doubts about the veracity of any single religious doctrine. Given the diverse and conflicting nature of these beliefs, it is reasonable to question the accuracy of any one religion's claims. While we cannot definitively conclude that all religions are wrong in an absolute sense, the overwhelming diversity and inconsistency among religious beliefs make it prudent to adopt a skeptical and agnostic stance, particularly when it comes to assertions about the nature of the divine or the afterlife.
So when analyzing an argument like this, I found it really helpful to locate the underlying reasoning the argument is based on. So for example, the underlying reasoning here seems to be something like this. P. When there are diverse competing answers that conflict with each other, the prudential response is an initial skepticism about any proposed answer. So I'm going to explain in a moment the problems that I see with this principle, but the reason I think why it's helpful to draw out underlying reasoning like this is that it allows us to apply the reasoning to non-religious contexts and then just kind of see what happens. I don't know what it is about religion, but people's brains like completely shut off when discussing religion. So applying the same reasoning to non-religious examples will hopefully help us turn our brains back on so we can think more clearly. Okay, so back to the principle. So in the abstract, P does actually seem like a fairly reasonable guiding principle. Like when you're confronted with complex, competing answers, it does seem wise to adopt an initial stance of skepticism. But things start to get tricky when we apply the reasoning to concrete, non-religious examples. So let's apply one of the examples I cited earlier. If one day multiple women started claiming to be my wife, and they each had like these really weird, complex stories on how we met, would it be prudential for me to adopt a stance of agnosticism toward the proposition that Brittany is my wife? Yeah, that would be the opposite of prudential. It would probably ruin my marriage and damage my relationship with my children. What this shows, I think, is that this principle is not universally true. But maybe it can still apply in certain contexts. So let's tweak the example just a little bit. So suppose that I was in a car wreck and woke up with amnesia. And then while at the hospital, multiple women started showing up claiming that they were each my wife. And then they each came in, different stories on how we met. They even had like pictures of us together. What in that case would be the most reasonable response? And it does seem like the answer is yes. Like it'd be wise to adopt skepticism until I could adequately determine who's right. But I want you to notice the difference between these two examples. So in the first example, I already possess loads of evidence that Brittany's my wife. So the existence of alternative claims doesn't actually do anything to warrant a stance of skepticism when I'm already in possession of really good evidence. But in the second example, I literally just wake up with amnesia. Here, I think the primary reason skepticism is warranted in the amnesia example is because I don't already have evidence that any particular alternative is correct. It's not because alternatives merely exist. Skepticism is warranted in the amnesia case because of my compromised psychological state. In light of this information, I think we should amend our principle. So let's do it. AP. When there are diverse competing answers that conflict with each other, and one has no reason to think any particular answer is true, the prudential response is an initial skepticism about any proposed answer. So while the amended principle does actually seem true, I don't think it has any bite. Basically, all it's saying is that you should be skeptical when there's alternatives and you don't know which alternative is true. Like, okay, sure, but when it comes to religion, I think most people would deny the middle clause. They would claim that they have at least some reason to think that their religion is true. So when pressed, They might claim to have had some sort of religious experience at church. They might claim to have been taught that it's true by competent authorities through testimony. They might think that they've personally witnessed a miracle. They might have heard God's voice speaking directly to them. They might even just claim that it just sort of seems true in the same way that it seems true that other minds exist. So the amended principle, even if it's true, I don't think it's going to apply to many believers, and therefore it's not really going to cause them to be skeptical of their religious beliefs. But there's a much, much deeper concern that I have with this principle, and that is that it's self-defeating. If I were to ask 10 different philosophers whether I should accept the amended principle and then why, I might get literally 10 different answers. But if that's the case, and I have no reason to think that any particular philosopher is correct, then by the amended principle, I should adopt a skeptical stance toward belief in it. Thus, the principle defeats itself and therefore I think should be abandoned. So to quickly summarize, Hitchens' argument is monumentally bad. Don't share it unironically. It's bad. But you know what? Actually, I want to know from you if you have a short quote from Hitchens or some other atheist that you think deserves this level of analysis. Leave a comment below with the quote. I'll take a look. If it's good, I'll do a video on it. I'd actually love to produce more of these shorter style videos. And then lastly, remember that Christianity is true.